So, this is my good friend and colleague from the Denver, Colorado area, Sandra Ceas, who is, of course, the author of the video that you've just seen, or maybe have just seen, called I Am. It's a very interesting video, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit about the video and its meaning and kind of her own story as it relates to the theme of the exhibit here, personal transformation and recovery toward the light.
This particular piece of art, I Am, is a video that's just under 10 minutes long. And the idea for the video came at a very tender part of my life. I was at a stage where I was away from family and just beginning to understand the gift that I was given as an artist and how could I use my gift in a way that was meaningful to changes in the world or changes in myself. In this particular piece, it is an expression of a transformation from an individual lowercase I am self state to a transformed capital I am Christ-centered self state. So I kind of woke up in my life at a point when this video came together. I had a studio in San Francisco that had a nice concrete floor. And I just had this vision of myself going through a transformation that was very tedious and carefully selected, kind of removing things from a past, weaving myself into a present, and actually experience a kind of enlightenment to a new transformation, to a new place. So that describes it without actually seeing the video. But if you were to recall the video or take a look at it after hearing those words, you would see that I wrote myself as I am in the lowercase on a piece of notebook paper, and then went through the tedious process of folding it like a fan, tearing it up, kind of reminding myself how we make choices in life and we fold into patterns and ways to get through each day. And then I started to tear them apart so I could take that moment of saying, my life needs to change. How do I do this? Do I take all the elements of my life and separate them? The next impression I felt was, well, I can also take these parts and reweave them into a new way, a new format, a new outcome. And so the video illustrates how I would do something like that, not removing particular elements of my life, but just restructuring them and reweaving them into a new entity. At that point, I started to realize it was very tenuous, it was very fragile, it wasn't very stable, and it still, I could see the lowercase I am in that. And that's when I took a match to it and put it all to ashes. Not necessarily, again, removing everything, but transforming it into something else, into a dust, into a new beginning, into fibers that are smaller that you cannot gather up and reweave anymore. But at that point, with the dustings, I could see that I could take the same finger of life, my own finger, my personal fingerprint, and put it into that ashes, and then to recompose, rewrite myself on a new piece of lined paperwork. And at that point, I could feel the new power that I had just gained, the way of sacrificing and allowing myself to give up myself to start anew, that I found myself writing, I am, in the capital sense. I am the new self. I am the self that has given all of myself up to be transformed by the Holy Spirit of God. And this is what I felt through the ashes of the light. So it was a tedious process, but it was a real eye-opening. And it was just something that I went into as an artist without actually knowing the outcome at all. If this piece were to be beyond the video in an installation, then you would see it on a loop repeating itself, and you would see the remnants of the paper and the ashes and the I am on the walls surrounding it. Just as a reminder of that submission to a higher call. So I am to I am.
Is do you consider this to be sort of emblematic of your current, quest in art? I myself, and we've had these conversations before, see art as a kind of spiritual exercise in a lot of ways. And of course, I don't have that gift or ability to do it. I do it with words. But I was just wondering if you, it's interesting. I'm teaching tonight about spiritual exercises from the 16th century, and I was wondering if you see art as a kind of spiritual exercise. And
I think exercise is probably not a word I would choose, but I do feel that it fits. I would probably say an exercise, I would translate it to a practice. As an artist, I feel like that we practice a process. Even if we're painting, we're still practicing a process. And we're doing it with an intention and an aim, but often the outcome is all in the process. It just emerges as you go. So I find personally in a lot of my artwork that I find the way to go through that process is through destruction before reconstruction. Such as in this video with the destruction of the paper through the flames or the tearing. I also work in mediums where I remove and tear things and pull out threads on things to just change the status of where it's at composition and then recomposing it. So maybe it's even somewhat of a ritual, a purification ritual, and personally, I think a lot of my art goes through that from a sacrificial sense. Like I feel like there's a sacrifice in it. There's a giving, there's a letting go. And then just waiting for that moment when you feel, aha, I know how to bring this back together. And it will never come back together as it was, but all the same components are still there to be the new. And I think that's also something that I find important to me in my art is the integrity of retaining all the elements. Even if they're burnt or torn or shredded, it doesn't matter. But if I can retain every fiber of it and just recompose it, I find that pretty important to the practice, or what you call an exercise, to reach that point.
Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you so much. That's really looking forward to showing that on this big wide screen on Friday night. Sort of like, well, I guess they don't have Cinerama anymore, but it's a pretty impressive way of showing. So appreciate it, and thanks for your contribution. And